Okay. And let me get the attendance link. I'm going to put the attendance link in the chat. You can click on that and plug in your information. That way we can ensure that you get credit for being here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Wonderful. Okay, it's 10:01. We're going to go ahead and get started as Alicia is pulling up the slideshow. Again, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. We always appreciate the partnership between us and all of our wonderful nonprofits. Congratulations on receiving CDBG funding for fiscal year 25-26. The next slide, please. There we go. Attendance is mandatory, as you know. Please confirm your agency's attendance by clicking the link that's in the chat, or you can scan the QR code below. So whatever's easier, just please make sure you sign in sometime during the meeting so that we can make sure that you and your agency get credit for being here. So today we are going to go over what is expected of you now that you have officially received the fiscal year 25-26 funding. Most of you are not new to this process, and nothing has changed on our end as far as the requirements, as far as HUD's requirements, as far as our reports. Everything's still pretty much the same, except for we have updated forms because we're using fiscal year 25-26 instead of what we're currently using, which is 24-25. But we'll go over the Exhibit B, Exhibit C, and before we begin, we do have Lauren Silver of Zoom Grants, and she's just going to go over a quick overview of, hi Lauren, thank you for joining us. She's going to go over Zoom Grants. For those who are new to Zoom Grants, this will be really helpful. For those who are not new to Zoom Grants, this will be a nice little refresher, and you might even walk away with a few extra little tools under your belt to make your reporting easier. So I will pass it on to Lauren.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Lauren Silver with Zoom Grants. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. There's so many buttons to push. Okay. So this is a quick tutorial on how to submit invoices and reports within Zoom Grants. This is our default titles within Zoom Grants, and if you do refer to anything in what we call Zoom Grants University, just know that what we call those features is maybe something different that the administrator is calling them. So just so you know, the very most important thing that you must do is make sure that you're using the full URL when you're logging in. Sometimes this can happen, and it will prevent you from doing things within the account, like downloading documents, because it won't access the security certificate. So always just make sure that you're using the full URL to log into your account. If you cannot log into your account, can't remember your password, you can always just click the forgot password to recover your password via a password reset. You can also, if you have any questions, contact our support team and we can help walk you through it. If you need to find your application, You want to be sure to look in the approved applications section. Maybe previously you'd been finding it in while you were working on it on the left-hand side of your page when you log in as an applicant. Here is where you will now see them in the approved applications folder, and you can show or hide those folders. When you find that application, you want to click the application title link to access that application. Once you are in that application, you may first want to consider at this stage adding collaborators to your application. Now that you've gotten through the application process, you might have others on your team that are helping you work on the report features or the financial features. And so you want to be able to add them and give them access to those respective tools. So you have the ability to, for existing collaborators that you may have already added during the application process, you can simply check those boxes. To add a new collaborator to work on either the application, report, financial, or to sign a contract within Zoom Grants, we have those features as well, but I don't think that those are being used here. So you can disregard that. You'll want to fill out the email, first name, last name, and their job title in the available boxes. And then you can see here, Chadwick Von Collaborator has been added. And then you can provide specific editing access if that person needs maybe only access to application and reporting, and you have somebody else that you're designating for financial tools. You can also list what are called additional contacts. Additional contacts that you list down here are a little bit different than collaborators. Additional contacts don't really have access to Zoom Grants. They just receive notifications or are copied on any kind of notices that might be sent out from the administrator. And remember that collaborators can only edit application data and reports and invoices. They cannot, however, submit an application, nor could they archive or delete any application. Only the head applicant can do that. You can see if you already have an existing collaborator who just needs additional access, you can click the box next to their name in order to add them to or give them access to that, as you see here. And be sure, of course, that you also click the invite button in order to provide access to that user. Now we're going to cover submitting invoices. In order to access any financial invoice, there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can create a new invoice directly from your approved applications folder, as I mentioned, which will be right next to the title of that approved application. Just click the Add Invoice button. Or if you're already logged in and within your application, you can just simply click the Financial tab. That's where you could also go back and navigate to edit a previously started or existing invoice that you might be working on, and just need to attach an additional document before you send. Creating a new invoice will create a new invoice, but you can always go back in and click a previously started invoice in order to edit it and submit it. You'll see that within your account, we'll keep a running total. And if you have any questions about any one of those invoices, just note that any invoice also has a little number at the bottom that you can contact our support team with questions. And it helps if you have that number available so we can find the needle in the haystack and assist with that. As you're completing that invoice, just click the button to create a new invoice, or as I mentioned, open up one that you're currently editing. As you navigate from field to field, you'll notice, of course, for some of you who are pros at this and have done it many times, that the system will save your work as you go from field to field. Just a pro tip, anytime that you are going from field to field, make sure that if you are copying and pasting from any values, that you're copying and pasting as plain text. And when entering numeric values, it's also important to make sure that you're inputting just numbers. Zoom Grants will put in commas and those values later. You don't need to insert dollar signs or anything like that. Once you've completed all of that information and all work is saved, you can click Submit this invoice. And to have some assurance that it is indeed submitted, you'll see a timestamp in Pacific time of when that invoice was submitted. If there were any fields, for example, that were incorrect, that invoice could get returned to you by the administrator, or it's for you to maybe edit and resubmit that invoice. Next, we'll talk about submitting reports. Similar to submitting or creating an invoice, the add a report button is actually will not create a new report. It'll just simply take you to the next upcoming report, which is due. You have a series of quarterly reports, I believe, with assigned due dates for each. As you are coming up on a report due date, you're usually sent a notice or notification to let you know that that report is coming up due, to help give you a little bit of notice to make sure that that's given on time. Just as a heads up, those typically will come from notices at zoomgrants.com. So if they're not already, you might want to add that to your contacts list to make sure it comes through. Once you click Add Report, either from your main dashboard or Approved Applications folder on your main dashboard, or by clicking the Report button if you're already logged into your account, you can then see that you'll have a series of reports that you can click into in order to complete each one over their designated time period that they're due. Once you click into those individual report tabs, fill out the questions, and then, of course, upload any requested documents at the bottom, such as supporting documentation or backup documentation that might be requested as part of the reporting piece as opposed to the financial report. Once you click the Submit button near the bottom of that report, we'll do a double check of this report to make sure that you've answered all questions. If anything is missing, we'll display that in red and let you know. And same as any kind of required document which may have been requested. Once you have gone back and corrected, provided answers to those questions, uploaded the required documentation, it's important that you go back in and click the Refresh Page button. This is sometimes an often forgotten step, but it is, once those errors are corrected, you want to essentially, before just trying to submit again, refresh the page to make sure that it has its most updated front-facing self as before that report is submitted, similar to how you would go about submitting an application as well. If any questions come up, we encourage you to contact us for help. That's what we're here for. There's a few different ways that you can contact us. You can click the Help button in the upper right-hand corner of your account. You can also just directly email questions@zoomgrants.com. Call us at 866-323-5404 extension 2, or you can go to Zoom Grants University, which is https://help.zoomgrants.com. And I can actually take you on a quick trip over to Zoom Grants University. When you click the Help button within your account, it will take you directly to the college for your user type. You can also go into Zoom Grants University here, help.zoomgrants.com. I can copy and paste this link in the chat as well if that's helpful, to peruse or search for anything that you want to learn more about within Zoom Grants. And again, look at just those articles that are applicable to applicants or popular articles over here on the right-hand side. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Rosie. Please let us know if you have any questions. Email is best because then we know how to check on what's going on. So questions@zoomgrants.com is always available if you need anything.
Thank you, Lauren. Really appreciate you joining us and explaining how to utilize Zoom Grants. And again, please feel free to contact Lauren if you have any questions as you begin the process of submitting your documents. Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Okay, going to move on to contract agreement and process. So as you all are pretty well aware. We will be asking for the Exhibit A, Exhibit B, and Exhibit C throughout this funding year, as well as insurance documentation, which some of you have already started submitting, so we appreciate that. So we will go over each one as we move into this training.
I just wanted to add to that we sent out an email to all of the contacts. So if you didn't receive it, just make sure to reach out to us, and that's just requesting the Exhibit A, the insurance documentation, and all the stuff that we need. And I think we're requesting that to be turned in by the 25th, I believe it was.
25th or 26th, one of those
Yeah.
two dates. Yeah.
So if you didn't receive that email, just do a quick search or just send us an email and we'll go ahead and forward that to you.
So the contract that you will be receiving in the next couple of weeks, that you will your agency will fill out and submit to us will include this verbiage, which we included last year as well. And it's an addition, it's a requirement that we expect most of you to be able to meet, and it hasn't been an issue this last fiscal year. So we don't anticipate it being an issue as we move into 25, 26. But basically what we're asking is that halfway through the fiscal year, you're halfway through expending your funding and also meeting your proposed accomplishments. And the reason we are asking that you do that is to ensure that it keeps you compliant. It keeps all of us compliant with HUD as far as expending the funding in a timely fashion. And it also ensures that there's that you'll be able to meet your accomplishments proposed. And then it's a great way of checking in halfway through the fiscal year to just make sure that what was expected in July is still happening as we're halfway through the process. We do understand that there may be a handful of agencies that may not be able to expend their half their funding by the end of December because of the nature of the work. So we take that into consideration, and that it wasn't a problem this last year and it shouldn't be a problem moving forward. So just want to make sure that you are aware that we do take all of that into consideration. But at the end of the day, if there are any questions, comments, concerns as we move into fiscal year 25, 26, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can definitely try to work through any concerns you may have. Next slide, please. So the overview of contract exhibits. So Exhibit A is basically the work that we're asking. It's basically what you're planning on doing this coming year. And you've already submitted a lot of that information to us. So thank you in advance thank you for submitting that in advance. But Exhibit A just goes into a little more detail, and that is included in your contract. The Exhibit B is the quarterly reports that Lauren just went through. You'll be submitting those in Zoom grants. And that's just a quarterly update of what was accomplished during those 3 months. And then that gets reported to HUD because HUD wants regular updates as to what the progress is of the projects funded. And then Exhibit C is a summary of the accomplishments. So it's basically like the Exhibit A, it's just what you did do. So Exhibit A is what you're going to do, and the Exhibit C is what you did do. And most of them should match. I mean, if your numbers are pretty conservative, so if you say you're going to serve 10 people with the funding, usually most everybody's accomplishments are around that. If there's a major differences that can be explained in the narrative. So again, don't stress about, oh, I said I was going to help 10 people, but we really helped 20, or we only helped 8. That can easily be explained in the narrative. So that is also part of what you will be including in your exhibit. Any questions so far? And I'm going to kind of breeze through these because most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with the process, and the process hasn't changed. So I don't want to take up too much of your time going over these because you're pretty familiar with them. But if any of you need clarification or need me to go into a little more detail, please feel free to raise your hand and we can definitely slow it down, or I can go into more detail if that's needed. So here is a look at what the Exhibit A looks like. This year, all of you have already answered questions 2 through 7 in when we were getting the information for our action plan that's submitted to HUD. So we're not asking you to put that information in the form again in the exhibit because you've already answered it. So we're saving you a little bit of time there. But everything else does need to be filled out. So questions 1 and questions 8, and further down, Alicia was showing the second page. There's a second page. All of that does need to get filled out and submitted to us by the 26th. Next slide, please. Okay, the Exhibit Bs. Here is here are the dates for when those are due, and we usually ask that they are due 30 days after the end of the quarter. So the quarter ends on September 30th, the report's due October 30th. The quarter ends December 31st, the report's due January 30th. So just keep that in mind, that you have 30 days to submit your Exhibit Bs after the end of the quarter. The only difference is that last one, quarter 4, that one will be due slightly sooner than the end of the fiscal year. And that's something that we can't emphasize enough, is that the last quarter is actually not a full 3 months. It's more like 2.5 months. And you might even look at it as only 2 months, because if you're having to submit everything by June 10th, you might only count your accomplishments through May 31st. And that's okay. The reason that last quarter ends sooner than what the actual quarter is, which is June 30th, is because we have to submit everything to our finance department by mid-June, because I'm not really sure exactly what I'm sure it's a finance thing, but basically our requirements with our finance department to get checks out to you and get things processed in a timely fashion require us to submit everything before the end of June, which means that move pushes your deadlines up a little bit so that we can make sure that we have time to process everything and submit it to our finance department so they have time to process everything, so you get your checks and everyone's happy. So that is why that last quarter is going to be cut short. So we just want to let you know now, plan accordingly, so that you are able to comply with that requirement. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving into the CDBG national objectives. So in order, and I'm just going to really quickly go over this because obviously you're all receiving funding because your project, your program, what you're doing meets a national objective. So most of you, the objective that is being met is to benefit low and moderate income people as defined by HUD, which is people that are 80% or below the area median income. Now, for some of you, even though you do take into consider income for reporting purposes, income isn't necessarily a factor because they fall under a category called presumed benefit. And those are the people you see in the box, listed in the box. So abused children, victims of intimate partner violence, those who are elderly, HUD considers elderly people 62 and over, the severely disabled. Oh, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry. Ooh, okay, it went away. The unhoused, people who are illiterate, or adults who are illiterate, persons living with AIDS, and migrant farm workers. Those are all considered presumed benefit, which means that income is not a factor when it comes to them being eligible for CDBG. Now, that doesn't mean that you as an agency can't help anyone and everyone. It just means that the people served with the CDBG funding should meet a national objective. So either they should fall into the low to moderate income persons category or a presumed benefit. But again, that's never been an issue. You all do a wonderful job of complying with that objective. So just keep doing what you're doing. And our income limits have gone up as of June 1st. So every year HUD will review what low to moderate income looks like based on the county's assessing the county. It's based on the Santa Barbara County. So the area median income has gone up. So you could be, for example, a family of four, make $141,000 a year and be considered low to moderate income. So I think that there's this misconception that CDBG only helps. There's this idea that it's helping, only those that are, receiving aid or the poorest of the poor. It's basically all of us. Pretty much everyone benefits from CDBG. So I think that's a really powerful chart to look at, and it really puts things in perspective, considering that Santa Maria's area median income, I think, is under 80,000, I want to say. So there you go. Next slide, please. So the quarterly reporting requirements also requires us to submit information based on race and ethnicity. And again, I'm not going to go too much into it because we haven't had many issues. I think the only thing I would like to add is that the race and ethnicity is really based on the individual being served, based on what they feel their race and ethnicity is. So it shouldn't be an assumption. It shouldn't be a question. I mean, if they it's whatever they choose to report. So that's and there is an ability to include mixed categories. So it sometimes, most of us are, it's not just that we're one race or ethnicity, we're mixed. So HUD does provide for us to be able to include that in the reporting. So just wanted to go over that. Next slide, please. And here's an example of our public services client intake form. This is something that we designed, and it is in English and in Spanish, so we do have it in both languages. And this is a tool that you can use, and it will capture all of the information that you will need to submit in your Exhibit B, and it captures all the information that we need to submit to HUD. So this is a great tool to use. Of course, you can use your own client intake form if your agency has one that works really well and allows you to easily submit the reports required to us, feel free to use them. You don't have to use this form, but we wanted to create a form that makes it easy for you to use and to provide to your clients that they can fill out, and then it's easy for you to get the information and submit to us. So again, if you have any questions about this form, please let us know, but it's on our website. Our website is still showing all of our 24-25 documents. We will be updating our website in the coming weeks with the 25-26 documents. But so just bear with us, but just keep that in mind that right now it's still showing the old forms, and we will and always please use the new forms. All the new forms should say fiscal year 25-26, and that's because, as you can see, number 8, it shows the new income guidelines. So we want to make sure that you're using the latest and greatest because some information has been updated. Next slide, please. And here's here's a look at our final report, the Exhibit C, which a lot of you are very familiar with because that was just submitted last week to us for fiscal year 24-25. And it's like it's the same format as the Exhibit A. It's the same questions. It's just in a different form as far as a different tense. So now we're asking you what did you do instead of what are you going to do. So when the time comes, you'll just fill that out, and like I said, it should be fairly easy to fill out because it'll be very similar to your Exhibit A. Next slide, please. Oh, and this is the second page of the Exhibit C. And again, it looks very, very similar. It's just wrapping up the fiscal year. So again, recap of the reporting requirements. Exhibit A is what you're going to do. Then throughout the fiscal year, you'll submit 4 Exhibit Bs, and then your Exhibit C is what you did do. I do want to emphasize that we're saying you're going to submit 4 Exhibit Bs. That's assuming that you're going to carry out the project throughout the 11.5 months throughout the fiscal year. But let's say that your agency expends all the funding within the first 3 months. Like at the end of September, you've already met your accomplishments, you've already expended your CDBG dollars, you're good to go. You can submit your Exhibit B and your Exhibit C at the end of September, and then you don't have to worry about us again. So you can be done with your program at any time throughout the fiscal year. We don't require you to wait until June. We don't require you to submit things every quarter as far as, to spread out the funding and, do 25% every quarter. If the money that we provide to you is used and you need it and you meet all your accomplishments earlier than those 11.5 months, that's okay. And we are more than happy to get all of that information early and close out your project. And then you don't have to worry about us. We don't have to worry about you. It's totally okay. So we don't require you to wait until a certain time to be done with your project. Next slide, please. So submitting your request for payment. So we do have an RFP form that we request that you submit your documentation with. So it's basically like a cover sheet, and then you'll submit all the backup documentation with that. You will submit a signed copy of the RFP form and the backup documentation in Zoom Grants. as of last year, we don't require wet signature anymore, which is great. So that way you don't have to worry about mailing us the wet, an RFP with the wet signature. A summary of expenditures must be submitted along with the RFP form. That is also included in our forms, so you don't have to create one. You're welcome to use your own summary of expenditures, but you don't have, but we have one for you in case you need it. We do ask that you don't submit more than 4 RFPs a fiscal year. And again, you don't have to wait until the end of the quarter to submit an RFP. You can submit your RFP at any time. And again, you don't have to submit 4 RFPs. If you only have one RFP, you can submit one RFP, but just keep in mind that we don't want you to submit that one RFP in June. If you have one RFP, it's usually because you're submitting it early, because also we have that requirement of that you should be expending half your funds by the half of the year. So we're very flexible. We're just these requirements are based on if your agency is planning on using 25% of the funding every quarter. But again, if you expend the funding early, you can submit all of this early and bypass having to submit any further documentation. Next slide, please.
I'll go ahead and take over from here.
Oh, did I take over your chart? I'm sorry, Alicia.
You're fine. So this is the request for payment form. Not much has changed. So you'll fill out your Exhibit A, and you'll designate the line items that you want to use for CDBG funding. So this table here should be matching what you proposed in the Exhibit A. So if you said for salaries, you're going to spend 10,000, that's what you'll put here. Salaries, 10,000. And then any additional line items that you have, you'll list there. You'll include the CDBG expenditures incurred from dates. So if you're covering a certain quarter or a certain time period, then just make sure to include that. So these columns here are color coordinated with these instructions. So as I mentioned, match the Exhibit A. RFP billed to date, the blue column, the first request for payment should always equal 0. The second will include any amounts that were paid out in previous requests for payments. And then the green column is just how much you're going to request for this RFP. And then just please note the RFP must be a minimum of $1,000. And then again, a reminder, there's a maximum of 4 requests for payments, and you can select the RFP number from the drop-down menu up at the top. But yeah, just you'll need to submit this and then all the required backup documentation. So I'll go over that in the next couple slides. So your invoice must also include a summary of expenditures. So you'll designate the line item. So if you're going to do supplies, you'll list the vendor name, the data transaction, period of billing cycle, the invoice amount you'll list there, and then the amount you're requesting for CDBG. And this will be located on the second tab of the request for payment template. And this is required for all line items except for salaries. Salaries will have its own separate one. So if you're doing both salaries and say occupancy, you'll submit both. So this is the salary summary of expenditures. It just asks the employee name, payroll period, end date, the total amount of hours that the employee worked, and then the hours that you're billing to CDBG. And then also the employee's hourly rate that'll be billed. And then all of this will need to be backed up with timesheets and also the pay stub to back up the employee's hourly rate. And then it's also important to note to not round up to the nearest cent. we've actually been monitored by HUD, and that was something that they pointed out, to not round up totals. So just something to keep in mind when you're adding things up. Salary, employee time card, and attendance record. So employee work hours billed to CDBG must be documented with employee timesheets. The amount billed must include only the actual amount of time that was worked on CDBG related activities. So we're not including employee fringe benefits or anything like that. And then the timesheets must also include a description of the activity and service provided. So I'll show you an example of the time and attendance records that we use. And let's see. Also, just can't charge a percentage or prorate, just because we need to have that documentation showing the type of activities worked, just to make sure that it's CDBG eligible. So this is what our template looks like. If you built for salaries in the past, you're pretty familiar with the template. We always like to note too that agencies are allowed to use their own. So sometimes payroll records or payroll systems have their own capability to add notes to the time worked. You can also do that as long as it includes a description of what was done and it's clear that it was CDBG related. So if you've used this one in the past and want to try to use your own template, just reach out to us and we'll review it and make sure it's good to go before you start creating the invoice and billing for it. Does anyone have any questions on salaries or just the request for payment in general? I'll continue to go into required supporting documentation. So for salaries, like I had mentioned, we require employee time card documenting the time worked on CDBG activities. So descriptions can include case management. You provided counseling sessions for an hour or two, or you just worked on administering the program, like running reports, creating a report, things such as that. And then we also require payroll spreadsheets, so that must include the hourly rate, and that should match what you're requesting on the summary of expenditures form. If you're requesting funds for occupancy, we must need a copy of your lease agreement with the terms. So it must be up to date. And then when you submit your invoice, or when you submit the lease agreement, you could just submit it at the beginning of the year. If there are any changes, just submit the new one. And then we need proof of payment that it was paid to your landlord. And then for any general purchases or direct assistance to individuals, we need itemized invoices just to make sure the purchase items are eligible. And ineligible activities include furniture and equipment, such as the electronics. And then, of course, we need proof of payment. Our payment process, funds can only be used on a reimbursement basis. Many of you are familiar with this. And let's see, errors on invoices or missing documentation will delay the process. So we'll follow up with you just to say, hey, this document's missing, and we'll give you a certain deadline to respond to that. Also, if quarterly reports or your final Exhibit C aren't submitted by the deadline, we'll hold your check until those are submitted. And just an important reminder, the deadline to submit final requests for payment and reports will be June 10th, 2026. Oops. Sorry, I locked myself out. Invoicing do's and don'ts. Make sure to plan. As you know, we have our June 10th deadline, so just make sure to plan accordingly and close out the grant as soon as possible if you're able to. As Rosie mentioned, if you're able to expend all your funding within the second quarter and you've also reached your demographic or your proposed goal for the number of people served, then you can go ahead and submit your final invoice after the second quarter and your final reports, and then we're good to go. And then also just make sure to provide clear backup documentation. One of our head reps once said the file must speak for itself. And then also just don't put the agency's funding at risk by providing missing documentation or required deadlines. And then don't bill for ineligible expenses. Your contract period will be July 1st, 2025 through June 10th, 2026. Anything billed prior to July 1st will not be reimbursed. And then audit requirements. If your agency receives more than $750,000 in federal funds, you'll be required to do a single audit. So if usually that's requested with the application or during the annual monitoring review. So city staff will review records through an annual monitoring review. So this includes like your quarterly reports that you're submitting. And then at the end of the year, we'll submit a desk monitoring review to be filled out by your agency. And then based on a risk analysis, we'll select a few agencies to conduct an on-site monitoring review. So we'll just go and review your CDBG file, any client files, just to make sure things are being kept up to date. And then failure to submit reports and invoices in a timely manner, or if you left any funding on the table, that will be addressed in the annual monitoring review letter and will also be reported to the Block Grants Advisory Committee. CDBG record keeping, as I mentioned, your file should speak for itself. So accurate record keeping is crucial to CDBG management. Just make sure your files are up to date and securely stored. So all the agencies are pretty good at keeping their records up to date and available. And then also just please note that records should be retained for a period of 5 years from the end of the grant closeout. And I think that's it for CDBG record keeping. And then timeliness. Rosie had mentioned that with our new contract requirements, the agencies must expend at least 50% of its contract amount by the end of the second quarter. CDBG subrecipients are required to expend their funds in a timely manner, and then HUD conducts the timeliness test every year, so we just have to make sure that we're in line with our timeliness test. And any unspent subrecipient funds can place the entire CDBG program into non-compliance. So we just want to make sure we're drawing down funds and showing HUD that we do need the funding. So if we have too much money just sitting in the bank, it's not really a good look. And then also our subrecipient resources will be posted on our city's webpage. It'll be linked here. And as Rosie mentioned, we'll be updating that within the next couple weeks, so you'll be able to access all of the updated forms. And here's our contact information. So we have a work group email address and a work group phone number. So if you call or email those, it'll go to all of us. If you want to reach out to one of us directly, our information's listed there. And then again, Zoom Grants information. They have their help desk. You can call or email, and they're pretty responsive. And that concludes our subrecipient training workshop. We'll upload this video onto our city's YouTube page, and it'll be posted on our city's website. And then we'll also provide this PowerPoint following this meeting. But that is all. Rosie, is there anything you want to add, or if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand.
Any questions from the group? Oh,
Right at the 1 hour mark, or 1 hour and 5 minutes. We did good.
yeah, I'm gonna stop recording.